Hello and welcome to a special discussion that is happening at the East African Business Summit in Nanyuki, and we've gathered together business leaders, thought leaders, who have been discussing for the past few days what happens to East Africa going forward. Are we innovative enough? Are we positioning ourselves globally to actually compete? And we've had great discussions, and what we want to do is engage some of the people who spoke and also the people who are attending the conference to pick their minds on what they think about the various things. So we have a panel, and I'll introduce that panel to you in a moment, that will help us to engage this. And I'll begin straight with you, Kamau, from the University of Nairobi, and very interesting things that you're speaking about in terms of how the university is innovating, how you're helping young people and some older people be able to take their ideas to market. The question, though, is in terms of intellectual property, Kenya is famous for not respecting it. Even at a private level, we watch pirated movies. Forgetting the government, the private sector, which will see an idea that your people came up with and say, let's take it and go run with it. Do you have that fear? What can be done to ensure that your people are the ones who are benefiting from this idea?
Thanks very much for the question. And it's a real honor to be able to be here to talk about what some of the innovations coming out of the university space, and it's not just our university, it's true across the board. What I'd like to say about IP is that, first of all, we personally within the University of Nairobi, we have an intellectual property policy. And so that means that whichever ideas are coming out of the university are protected from the get-go. But we're open because we feel our mandate is to the greater public, not just to our own community within the university. We very regularly, probably just once a month or so, we get people coming in from outside of the university community saying, look, I have this idea. I understand that you can assist people in prototyping and getting into the marketplace, which is exactly what the unit that I run is about. And what we do is we sign an NDA to start.
That's a non-disclosure
agreement. A non-disclosure agreement. And that lets them feel safe. We also tell them that the last thing we would ever want to do as a university is to misuse that information they've given us and maybe allow it to be exploited by people other than themselves, because we have our reputation, of course, to protect. So, so far, and of course, we're in the infancy of this process, so it isn't something we've been doing for a very long time. But so far, we haven't had any problem at all. And I think the real challenge is to get people to feel, you know, the innovators out there, to feel that there is an ecosystem that's being created which will actually be receptive to their ideas and within which they'll be protected. So I think it's something that we need to look at all together as what the buzzword we use is a national innovation system. All the players, private sector, government, universities, come together to sort of make sure that these things don't happen. I know there's enough stories that go around that say that there are sharks, private equity type people will come in to grab your idea and run away with it. But at the same time, young innovators have to understand that owning a smaller part of a very big thing is better than owning 100% of something which isn't going anywhere. So that there's a balance, and we need to create structures that also negotiate that process, or so that, you know, the young, like for example, there's some big companies that have come to us and said, this is what we're looking for. And we've been able to negotiate with them on behalf of the smaller players so that they don't get exploited.
All right, Michael Macharia, you're a great evangelist for technology, for obvious reasons. You run a multi-billion shilling company that is obviously in the technology field. But is there a danger that we are fetishizing technology? We're making it a fetish in the sense that we think all our problems will be sorted through a technological solution. We spoke about traffic in this conference. People have spoken about things like tribalism. People have spoken about things like running our elections better. And the solution you'll always hear is a technological solution. Is technology everything?
I think for you to really look at this, you need to look at the three pillars in any change in any major business issue. The first thing is people and culture. The next is process, and the next is technology. So I think you need to find ways in which those three components are able to come together. So before you employ technology or deploy technology, you need to figure out what issue are you solving. Is it a process issue? Is it a business issue? And at the same time, do I have the right people to be able to deploy that or to be able to run the system? So I think it's really trying to balance those three pillars: people, process, and technology. Now, whatever problem you have, you need to figure out, do I have the resources? Do I have the relevant technology? And I think from a point of view, you don't have a copy and paste mentality whereby we say, whatever happens in Europe or in Asia will work for us in Africa. We need to figure out what processes or what is relevant to us. Then we need to pick it and then readapt it to us.
Dr. Ndemo, there's a very pithy comment that was in one of the papers, and I think it's apt to this discussion, which is recognition at top government levels of the importance of technology. And I'll rephrase it in the way that when, say, the president visits a school, or the prime minister, or any other high government official, chances are they will be entertained by the school choir. They will be entertained by the school choir performing a traditional song. You very rarely hear them touring the science labs. And so whereas, yes, your ministry is doing great work at a very high level, but in terms of the culture shift that Michael is talking about, are we there?
We are not there yet. I must say that in terms of our ministry, for example, we have had the privilege of the president being with us on any major event. For example, the launch of open data, the launch of the undersea cable. These are high-level participation by the top government, but we need to take it to the end where young innovators can be recognized. And this, actually, I should blame it on ourselves, because usually the leaders, if you invite them, they would come. If you show the importance of that, like we have shown the importance of culture, and the reason why they go to study is not just entertainment, it's actually expression of our culture, which we have placed so high. So if we begin to consider technology, one of the key things, you find the leaders coming, and plus I believe that leaders follow, they don't lead. Yeah. What the people want is where you find the leaders moving towards. We can make anything as important for them to come to. So the problem has been ourselves, and we have begun to deal with it. And now that you have raised this, I would see my counterparts in science and technology and say, let's be putting this high on the agenda.
Joe Mucheru, you work for a famously young company. It's less than 15 years old, but in addition to that, on one of your corporate videos, one of the people was saying that the average age is 27 in terms of the Google Nairobi office. But that issue of generation, it's all well and good for you because it's very young, it's people who are unafraid to shake the tree and see what falls out of it. But you have companies which are led by old people. Some of the people in this room are beyond the age of 50 even. Are they as receptive to ideas in your dealings with them and what you've seen? Are they as receptive to ideas as you would see in the Google office in Nairobi or on any Google campus in the world?
So it's not always the same, because I think the first thing is they have a lot more information and sometimes fear of, say Google. They look at the market cap and then they have now other questions about that company even before you've presented whatever item you want to present. Mm-hmm. So, there are places I've gone and we've had a meeting with the CEO, and, in the middle of the whole conversation, the question is, are you going to take us over? and you sit and think, no, this is not about that. And so, I spent quite a bit of time first trying to explain where we're coming from, what we're trying to actually do. Mm-hmm. But the challenge is that the market is actually not waiting for us to actually learn these things. And that's why in my presentation I was saying, you have to be open. If companies are not going to be open and they're not going to listen to the ideas throughout the company and from the customers, then they begin to lose. So, of course, it's not that, all the CEOs have that problem. Mm-hmm. But I would say there's the whole idea that you must have all the information and know what's happening before you take those steps. So the risk-taking is one of the big fears. But I think with all the information we have today, then you can see people take more calculated risks. And I think that fear is going off. From when we started, in 2007, the questions of, why we're here, what we're trying to do, obviously have gone off, and people are looking at how can we actually work together.
Solomon, you're, I would say, a son of Africa, but a grandson of the world, in the sense that you were born here, you've left the continent, went to some of the best schools, and now you're back trying to establish solutions for the continent. But is your journey necessary anymore? Do we need young people to leave, to find the answers, to leave and to find themselves in order to be able to come back and help out?
I think it is, and it kind of goes to some of the discussions we had yesterday as well. There's a lot of knowledge out there that we need to be going out, learning, looking into new cultures, new models, and so forth. I know that we are advancing here. I know that we are setting up companies and so forth, but there are technologies that are being developed based on some cultural contexts, based on, for example, some innovation hubs that exist around the world. Take around MIT or go to Silicon Valley and so forth. I think there's a lot that we have to learn. The key is that we need to bring it back here.
And I want to throw that back at you, Kamau, because he's saying you need to leave and come back. You're saying we have it here in Nairobi. I can be a 16-year-old with an idea and I come to the Fab Lab in Nairobi and be able to do that. Do you agree with what Solomon is saying in the sense of having to leave to be able to come back, specifically leaving the continent of Africa to get the good ideas?
Yes and no. I think, as we've been talking already, it's very obvious this is all about people. It's really not about technology, it's primarily people. So it's about enabling people, empowering them. So it's said that if you want to change an entire culture or people, you need to really change 15% of the youth or some kind of figure like that. There is a place for sure for those people who have exceptional talent to go to where things are being done the best, like MIT, where Solomon has been, and other places like that around the world. But we're finding that access to information, the kind of thing, like right now you can actually sit in front of your computer and on YouTube watch lectures by professors in some of those top universities. And we need to start reinventing even the way that we reward or enable people to sort of show that they've gotten this kind of knowledge in keeping with the changes that we're seeing happening. We do not need to go en masse outside of the country. Many people can be educated here to very, very high levels because of access to information. And then, as well as that, the reason that I'm so happy that people are able to hear a little bit about what we're doing at the University of Nairobi and other universities too is facilitation, so that you have, where technology is concerned, some rather inexpensive equipment that can allow a young person to walk in and then express that knowledge that they have in their mind through the creation, prototyping, making things that can make a difference in people's lives. So that is becoming much more accessible here in Africa. So no, yes and no, just to wind up again.
I want to speak about money for a second. And in fact, I'll ask you to do me a favor and pass the microphone down to you, sir, because you're my banker. I hold enough Standard Chartered cards. Are you brave enough to lend money to the people that Kamau is producing? When someone comes to you and tells you, I need 500,000 shillings to be able to take my idea to market, are banks in Kenya able to be that brave?
I think the banks in Kenya are ill-equipped to be able to fund innovation. And the reason is we are commercial banks, and commercial banks would normally lend against cash flow. A typical innovator does not have cash flow. They have an idea, the idea that needs to be developed, and once it's developed, it then is able to generate enough funds for it to be bankable. So we're actually looking for a different funding model. Commercial banks would come in probably after the idea has grown, but you're looking for somebody who would come in and support the idea and take the risk that the idea or the innovation would either succeed or fail. And based on that, they build in their own safeguards and their own premiums. And once the idea has taken off and it's grown, then you pass it on to commercial banks. So the straight answer is no, the banks in Kenya are not equipped to fund innovation. But there is an opportunity for banks actually to participate in a way in building either a fund or setting aside some money that can help feed in to the kind of innovations that we are looking at. But it would not be directly from commercial banks.
Just what I want to throw this at you in the sense of it's not so much money this time, but it's more to do with what's going on at this meeting. And it's a question we asked when we were running our series of interviews before, is we have a meeting of this kind, big names, big faces, big companies that come together, and at the end of the day, nothing much happens. Then you threw out the example of 2002 when the fiber optic cable idea came out of a meeting such as this. What's that structure to ensure that we have similar success stories going forward?
Right. Thank you very much, Wallace, for the question. The structure of the summit is actually intended to build on the successes that we have had in the past. When you look at the theme that we are seeing from everybody here, we are building on the technology that was invested in 2002 from this event. When we met here and proposed that the community the business community invests in Easy, that then catalyzed others to, for example, government took leadership to bring in teams, private sector took leadership to bring in SECOM, and now we have 3 cables serving the region. Telcos have now invested in fiber optic throughout the region, and we are leveraging on that investment to take this service to the next level. So that success is what has built M-Pesa, it's what has built some of the stuff that you're seeing in terms of broadband access. But we are now saying, as East Africa, we have endowment in terms of the quality of people, we have huge resources, but we're also facing challenges in terms of production, in terms of access to markets. And we were looking at the theme of innovation and saying, right, let's come here and use this technology platform to understand data analytics, for example, and understand how can we take this capacity, these resources we have in East Africa, to produce more and to produce relevant products. And then identify who is actually coming up with these initiatives. What are the innovations? For example, Kamau is talking about, Macharia is talking about, what are those initiatives so that the business community can understand them and begin to know where to put their money. Beyond that, we are then looking at efficiency. If we are going to be competitive as a region, our governments have to be facilitative in terms of policy, in terms of regulation. The private sector has to be more innovative in terms of how they produce, the people they invest in. So how can we use the theme of innovation to enhance efficiency? And finally is the issue of market access. How do we again use data analytics to understand the markets? How do we use data analytics to understand the customer who we need to be targeting? So this information has come through very, very well. It has fitted in very well from the innovations from the University of Nairobi, what we are doing with government in terms of innovation, IBM and Google sharing with us. And I'm really excited about what we can now do with this output as the business community to then begin to implement these things and come back in a couple of years and say, as a result of this meeting, these are the things that have been implemented, this is the change we have delivered, this is how we are heading towards the vision 2020 that we have identified from this summit.
John, to come back to you, and it's totally out of left field, and I'll put you on the spot. You have started a successful company. This was back at the very end of the 90s, that's with the Wananchi group. You've worked for a company that someone else has started, which is one of the most successful in the world. How do you compare those experiences? Would you have grown, for instance, a company that you began to a global level? Is it possible to do that coming out of this part of the world? Is it possible to take what Google is doing and localize it?
So it is possible, actually, for both. The challenge, I think, is how much support you get. So I think when we started Wananchi, we were very fortunate. We got angel investors that came in and put money on very young people to say, look, here's money, go build an ISP. The same thing happened to Larry Page and Sergey. Eventually they got their money and they started Google. And really it started about the same time. We started in 1999, Google was 1998, yes. The valuations are very different, number of employees is very different. But I think with the right support in our markets, we can actually be able to do that. But we also need to have a vision for not just Kenya. You need to look at Africa, you need to look at the world. I mean, Google now is in 55 countries. We've got over 30 employees. To be able to do that, there are so many different hurdles and challenges you have to go through, legal and so on. They get a lot of support, also from the government. So the environments that we are in needs to be one that harnesses and helps businesses actually grow. But that is also beginning to happen. M-Pesa is being exported all over. And in a sense, I think that's going to be the future. And I agree very much with the PS. The innovation that will come out in the future, we're going to see something large coming out of Africa. We just have too many opportunities right now.
Betty Mane, you're sort of sitting at the back of the room very happily. But I want to put you on the spot as well. You head up the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Now, manufacturers is this big warehouses with equipment in them. So for you, innovation will be very incremental. 1% improvement here and 2% improvement there. But you're sitting here in a room full of people in technology who will tell you about 100% growth, 200% growth. How does manufacturing come into that equation, the equation of innovation?
The sort of manufacturing that's happening in Kenya is the manufacturing that we've had so far is quite basic, meeting basic needs and basic for basic foods and basically what we think the market needs. But there will be shifts, and I think we have seen, we've seen in the past, say the attempt with a car, and the reality on the ground is if we had actually proceeded, we could have built a car industry here, and there's a lot of effort to get steel mills and get the process going once again. So for some of these ideas that are coming out, I think there is also opportunities for Kenyan businesses to go into this high-tech manufacturing, and it will be, I think it will be quite possible. So there should be opportunities for upscaling. The shift globally right now is manufacturing is looking for cheaper destinations, cheaper source markets. Africa is poised to reap from that move. So I think Kenyan industry should be able to look at these alternatives and be able to produce these products locally.
Bitange, let me tell you my experience with government. My experience with government is getting stopped by a policeman on the road who probably doesn't own a vehicle, so he doesn't know what I'm supposed to do with the vehicle. My experience with government is hearing politicians speak about things that were fashionable 40 years ago, in the sense of appealing to tribe for votes and all that sort of thing. My experience with government, however, is also when you get to the airport and there's these fancy machines which you put the passport through. There's a very big disconnect, I believe, in government in terms of what's going on from an innovation perspective, what's going on from an efficiency perspective. How can you bring everyone to the same page?
Actually, it's a good question, because I want also to say something very little on manufacturing and the entire Kenyan economy. We have a lot of waste, both in government and the private sector. If you see, take for example sugar, the cost of production in Mumias, Brazilian will produce and ship it to Mombasa, and the cost they are selling in Mombasa is equivalent to the cost of production in Mumias, simply because we waste molasses, we don't produce enough power out of it. So there are several things we need to do in terms of minimizing waste. And one of the things that we are doing in government now is to attack inefficient areas. For example, we have done digitization, especially state law office, lands office, judiciary, and the amount of savings that are going to come from there is enormous. I said earlier, now when we go to Treasury, we actually go with a proposal. Give us this much money, we would make this much savings. And the Ministry of Lands, from the period we started the exercise on digitization, the revenue moved from 3 billion to 7 billion. We have not finished. By the time we finish, they will do 30 billion Kenya shillings. The amount of waste in procurement is billions, because we have not automated procurement in government. Once we automate several other billions out of it, we are beginning to centralize data through the shared service which Macharia was talking about. Because we have had a lot of waste. You have several departments buying computers all over here, buying software here and there. Now we have said, let us centralize this and begin to use private clouds so that we minimize the costs of within the government. These are just a few departments. The state law office, for example, the savings went up from a revenue of 30 million to 80 million monthly. They never used to get this extra 50 because we attacked with the digitization. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to destroy the silo mentality, because the silos means that you duplicate several services throughout the government. So we could do a lot more. We could do a lot more in terms of revenue collection, because if we are able to create more efficiencies, it would impact on our own taxation, because government now would be getting a lot more resources. So it has a direct impact on ourselves. So I agree with you, there are several areas we need to attack. We actually need even to go to the traffic area, which we have started to work with the Ministry of Transport. What I didn't say is that IT cuts across all sectors, from agriculture to transportation. This is an area we are targeting so that we don't have policemen on the road, for example, because we can man those roads using CCTV and send the bills directly to the people's homes and save the amount of resources. We will take the policemen from the road and put them in the back office to actually run the traffic from there. You would never see them, but you would begin to behave on the road, because there is no compromise here and there. You are captured on TV, you would pay the fine. So there are several things that we must do. I've said a few things about agriculture, how we can improve productivity. So in the next 4 or 5 years, if we continue this way, you are going to see a lot more changes, a lot more productivity in the government and as well as the private sector.
You were murmuring assent every word that Bitange was saying about efficiency, about the fact that the government is moving in certain directions, about the fact that the government is in a place where 10 years from now everything will be different. But some would argue that there's a certain appeal of inefficiency. People make money from inefficiency. The policeman on the road who is paid 15,000 shillings a month can supplement his income by stopping you because you are speeding, and you give him a bribe of 500 shillings. The procurement officer can supplement their income in that way. DOs and DCs have work because you have to go to their offices to get something signed so you can get an ID card. If you remove all these inefficiencies from the system, don't you believe there will be a lot of resistance from these groups that actually benefit from inefficiency?
Anytime you try and deploy technology, for sure, you'll always get resistance, because there are always people benefiting from the system. So we need to create more incentive models that, or we need to almost challenge. You need to look at a process that says, okay, if we deploy technology, what is the impact of deploying technology? Naturally, people are going to resist. Now, but the benefits, the savings, for instance, what the PS has said in Ministry of Lands, you're from 3 million, they're collecting 6 million. The benefits are big, are massive. So the resistance will always happen, and how you manage change, you just have to, once you automate, right, things are going to fall in place. And also, it's also a cultural transformation. I think at a country level, it's about leadership. We've got good leadership, and how do we drive constantly from the top to the bottom? We say, look, we need to transform this country, and or the whole East Africa region, to say, look, it does not pay, okay, to bribe somebody. So I think it's part of a cultural transformation that the whole continent needs to undergo, and that's going to be challenging. And if we don't address that issue, it's constantly going to haunt us. So we need to try and see, and especially with the youth, how do we encourage the youth to start seeing benefits in terms of not having to bribe a policeman? But at the same time, you need the systems. Once the systems are in place, there's no really running away. And part of it is what I was explaining earlier. Once you have citizen views, once you have centralized citizen data, exactly where are you going? There's a CCTV, there's a system, there's nowhere to go. You just have to pay the fine. So at some point, systems are going to manage. So it doesn't matter if you're very senior in government or you're very powerful, in quotes, the systems are going to manage you.
Right.
I wanted to add just one thing. So when Honorable Michuki said he's going to introduce the Matatu laws,
yes,
because he was able to sell it so well to the public, people said, look, we will walk to work. The community understood and said, look, we will do this, we will support this. And I think how we sell these ideas, how we bring this out to the community in terms of just information, that's going to be extremely important. Because if we don't do it right, they're the same people that will oppose it. But we've seen it happen, and so it's leadership and making sure we sell it right.
Right.
The money bit,
yes,
because you create efficiencies, you would have more money to pay good salaries. We are not able to pay good salaries because we are stuck in a vicious cycle that we can't raise enough to pay this. So it gives us an opportunity that people would get private sector type salaries working for the government, and that is what used to happen a few years ago, and we can change that.
All right. There's lots coming from the room.
One of the concepts that have been discussed right now.
Sorry, and also if you could get up.
One of the concepts that have been discussed in this forum is the fact that everything is going to go online. All the data is going to be online. And we talked about that we're in the process of creating a centralized data where all the citizens' information is going to be included in there, and that in the future, a lot of companies, individuals are going to have to use data mining, data analytics to determine where to focus their products on. One of the things that I've not had discussed is security of this data. What type of innovation or what type of controls are being put in place to ensure that that this data is secure? Obviously, I don't want all my data online where anybody can get access to it and do whatever they want with it.
Actually, I said it, but I should have said it, cybersecurity. When I said we're putting up the public key infrastructure, that is a key element for cybersecurity. Mucheru also talked about that clip on the cloud services. The cloud services come with security. They can't afford to have your data misplaced and then hope to get more clients. And then we are just about to finish the master plan for cybersecurity in this country. Right now, the risk is very low because very little of our data is out there, or individual data. But we must move towards that direction. We are encouraging doctors to begin to have personal data on the cloud, because what happens when you go to Nairobi Hospital, you go through several x-rays, and you decide to go to India. You go to India and you do exactly what you have done in Nairobi. But if this was available in the cloud, the doctors in India, when you are in the plane going there, they are studying it, they would start from where they need to get more new information. It also improves the efficiencies on a personal level. So the fear on security is actually misplaced, because we have several ways of securing it, even having backup systems. And that's why the government is investing in data centers with the private sector, so that they provide the backup systems. If that would have been the problem, the banks would not have moved on to online services. They have, I know Standard, you have in Chennai, India, whatever. It doesn't matter. Your data can be in Canada, and you can access it right away.
But I want to take up that question of data security from another angle, and I'll throw this back to you, Mike, in the sense that forget the data that you want to hide. What about publicly accessible data? An example here is mobile money transfers, which when it started you could be totally anonymous, but now even if I send money to a wrong number, I'll know that person's full name. I'll know their phone number. And you've seen what this has led to, where people are in prison trying to con you out of your money, and they know your name, and sometimes they call you, and if you're not careful, the first thing you do is panic, because you don't know how they know that you're Michael. And they say, tunakujua mahali unaishi, and we want to come and do this or that or the other, unless you give us this amount of money. That public data, do we have the cultural mindset right now to know that our data is out there, even that which we don't need to hide?
It's an interesting question. There are two ways I look at security and information. We have more to gain by integrating data. We have more to gain. So the challenges we have, and as humans, we always take the why not. Mm-hmm. Okay, we should not do it because there's risk. That's already a mentality that we need to move away from. When you go to America, for instance, you go to Europe, they know everything about you, which hotel you stay, your passport, what you've done. They know everything, right? So I believe that the first thing we need to see, security, there are fundamental ways of dealing with security, right? We need to see the greater good of this initiative. Naturally, you can have some security breaches, but what do we stand to benefit? by sorting this thing out. I think by just putting data together as a community and as a country, the value going forward is much more than having to worry too much about security. I understand security is critical, and there are many ways to manage security. There are global security companies. There are a lot of security network operating centers. The challenge is, are we willing to take the next leap and not say, for instance, every time I go and talk to a customer about cloud, I tell him, look, already I can tell you half of your problems are within your own organization because risk is within your own staff anyways, okay? Try and move the information outside from your organization to the cloud. For instance, every time somebody sending you a private email, they say, let me send it to Gmail. Is that Gmail on the cloud anyways?
Yeah.
So he said, no, send it on Gmail. So we are thinking we need to overcome that and just say, let us look at the greater good and move on.
Solomon, you have traveled all over the continent, and you also come from a famously innovative company, that's IBM. Now, in terms of monetizing ideas, in terms of monetizing these ideas that are coming out of Kamau's lab, the stuff that we are seeing people saying that they want to be able to do, how easy is it to do that in Africa?
So in a company like IBM, one thing that you have is access to people, and you have access to money. I mean, the company has been around for 100 years. This thing of, innovation, they're thinking ahead 10 years, 20 years down the line and innovating. But at the same time, you have the system where you can have the support of management, you can have the investment that you need to take it from basic science all the way to prototyping and then making it into a product. I think we really need to set up the institutions that would help us kind of go through that cycle. I think there are some good, interesting things that are being done, but I really think we need more partnerships that will allow this type of, from inception all the way to prototyping and making them into development and into a product. That whole cycle to be finished, it needs more investment, it needs more collaboration and working within organizations and with other organizations. So I think it's getting much easier, but I think we have a few ways to go. And yeah.
Kamau, sort of throwing a similar question to you in terms of being able to monetize ideas. We've been told banks will wait because of the way they're banks, risk averse, and so they want to ensure that the idea is working. But in a place such as this, in a place such as Kenya or East Africa, or even Africa as a whole, one of the things that we had previously is it's very hard to exit. I go in and give a friend of mine 500,000 shillings because I've got a great idea, but I don't have money. I've got money, but I don't have the ideas. But at the end of the process, you else because you don't know who will buy the idea because information is not being shared about who's high net worth and who's not high net worth. This idea of being able to exit in a profitable manner, how does that work in a case such as yours?
That's a good question. I mean, from the start, we don't expect the banks, as you've said yourself, to be able to do the kind of investment that you were asking about earlier, and that doesn't happen anywhere in the world. But with regard to when people come in, and probably that angel model is going to be much more common than anything else in Kenya to start with, and it's already happening within especially IT. What will happen is most likely you'll get, like if you ask Joe, what happened to those people who first invested into the company that he started himself earlier? Or the same question to Mike, they're benefiting. But I believe the Capital Markets Authority has already been looking quite closely. In fact, we had a visit from a team of consultants in our lab, and I know they went round to all the different players within what we can call our national innovation system, just to investigate what's going on and really to change some of the rules regarding, for example, being able to do that IPO, and so that there's exit strategies. So I'm not really worried about that. I know that that's something that we're going to mature into quite fast. It's been done all around the world. We have our own specific circumstances, but certainly they can be adapted to in order to make that possible. So once you start seeing those successes, and it's so important that the media is doing what it's doing, you're going to find a lot more people becoming sensitized to this route, so that rather than going to the stock exchange and getting perhaps 0.0000 something % of a company, you may be able to come in quite early, either through an angel fund or directly through the actual innovator, and get a sizable share of that company equity stake, and then when it actually grows big, you own a lot more. And people, I think, will adapt. Kenyans are really very commercially minded and oriented, and I think there's not a problem with that as far as I believe.
A good idea actually flies. It very quickly scaled up and it would move on to other markets. But what I've seen in other markets, like Korea, for example, Korea, for any road you drive, you count the vehicles. I think 10 out of 10 are local. They are able to support the local industry, go through the learning curve to go to the next level. The same thing you see in Taiwan, coming up with the mobile handsets. In Korea, the same thing. Our culture is not very patriotic. And that is very true, that when we see Macharia has come up with something that we must support until it goes up, that it's us. We don't have that usness to support. And I think we need to debate it, because if you saw when Nyayo car was made, we were dismissive. The same thing was happening in Malaysia. Now we are importing the Proton from Malaysia, which was started at the same time as Nyayo car. So the dismissiveness, the careless, the lack of confidence in ourselves that we can do it is a problem, and it would see a lot of failure in us.
Yes, my question is in regards to, we're trying to provide access to information, not only in Kenya, but also within the region. But one great challenge is, as you had mentioned earlier on, Dr. Ndemo, is in regards to last mile connectivity and backhaul connectivity. When we brought broadband about 2 years ago, we brought down the prices dramatically from about $3,000 per megabyte to as low as $500 per megabyte. But the challenge we are faced with is that these drops in prices have not been passed over directly to the end user. And we keep on getting questions coming back to us saying, okay, fine, you said Seacom is here, you said you're going to bring down the prices, we brought them down, but we're not actually experiencing this benefit. Now the question I'd like to put forward is, how can we involve other departments in government, not only the Ministry of Information, because we're looking at here like the local Ministry of Local Government, how they're going to manage the counties and deploy fiber in such a way that we have a situation whereby we can share infrastructure and that cost benefit is passed over to the end user. That's number one. And secondly, this benefit is also passed over to the regions that get broadband via Kenya.
I don't know whether Joshua is still around. Okay. One of the problems we have stated is the local authorities, and the other problem is with the operators, where they have refused to share, especially the fiber to home. If you go to Westlands area, Parklands, Rundas, there are 4 or 5 fibers, and I saw even one other operator saying that we are going to deploy ours. It's completely silly. I mean, it doesn't help. It penalizes the customer because each one of them would want to recover the capex they deploy in such. We have the policy in place for infrastructure sharing. And because the local authorities have not been having good revenues, they are actually moving from 100 shillings per meter to deploy cable to 1,000 shillings. And we've tried to engage the Ministry of Local Authorities. We still have a problem. When we were laying fiber through Wajir, even with the PS telling the clerk not to do it, they stopped the work. Indeed, I had to request that he be jailed until the fiber has gone through Wajir. So it was put in for 3-4 days. We dug the cable and laid it through. That's how difficult it is to explain to Kenyans that this is infrastructure like roads. We have a serious problem. And now the same fiber optic is now gotten into Ethiopia. We are supplying broadband into Ethiopia. We can do anything in Moyale, Wajir, This is the kind of development you need. We need to educate our local authorities. Mombasa, they are changing the charging again. So there is no predictability in how much they would pay in using the leeways or the access, the waylifts. That's the biggest problem we have. But as soon as they begin sharing, we would see some change. And of course, once we deploy LTE, which is very robust, 100 megabytes per second, that would actually force even the local authorities to rethink the way they are charging. That is how we would bring down the cost to wananchi. So everybody has a responsibility in this in order to lower the cost.
Betty Mana.
Thanks. I'd like to take up from, I think, two statements I think made by the peers. I'd like to take up I'd like to take up from two statements, one made by the peers and I think one made by yourself, about support for local products, because we would like to, obviously would like to see more manufacturing of this. So if there's going to be set-top boxes to roll out next year, it would have been very useful to have at least produced that locally. But one of the challenges that you face, even selling services, one of the challenges you face is I think we have a very warped image about protection, because we have seen more local products. A lot of the things we find in the supermarket is local products, and they're very good, and we're selling them in the region. I mean, 40% goes off into the region. So there's no reason why these innovations cannot take off. But it required initial protection. And for any services that come in, you'd obviously need supportive government policies. So when we talk about local procurement in government, it's very difficult to actually get the preferences that you're talking about for local products. So in order to be able to see greater diffusion and greater development, we also need supportive. I think you need a supportive framework. Buying, I mean, all these technology services, why is it that some of the people supplying services to government or to the private sector here are not the Kenyan companies? We're selling in Africa, and we're selling in other parts, but we don't buy locally, and we just need to have a much more supportive framework, the procurement rules. And I have seen, I mean, obviously I've seen the PS struggle with that and echo the same, but we need a lot more of that rolled out. The second part, which I think you'd asked him earlier, how come we don't know all these things are happening? And I think it must come back to the media. How many times have we showcased this information? I am quite surprised by what is happening. And we've seen some of it on TV before, but we don't really have a culture of celebrating these innovations. You talked about, we will cover a politician in a funeral, we will cover them looking at dancers, but we will not cover the Science Congress. So there is a role for the media to at least lift our own awareness so that this can become part of the celebration and just part of the acceptance.
Michael, I want to take that first question, which is, what has your experience been? Because you sell a lot to government, not just here, but in many other places. What's the experience been in terms of acceptance, one, of a local company, and secondly, the whole process that you go through before you're able to get the check and to deploy the technology?
I think first, as a Kenyan company, as we grew our business, the biggest challenge we had was acceptance. Why a Kenyan company? Are you capable of doing this? It's pathetic. Because you sit and figure out, and then you go to the next country, and you present, and they give you business. And you figure out exactly what is the problem. Don't they buy for us? Are they not buying from us because we are Kenyans? So the first thing, as the PS said, we need to change the perception of how we see our Kenyan companies. And you asked a question, how do we go global? There's no company I know of that went global that did not perform well in its own market. Now, if, for instance, I'm involved in a major project in the Kenyan government, I can then take that IP in terms of capability and replicate it in the next government, the next government, the next government, right? Because it's IP I'm leveraging. Now, what's happening is, for instance, even when there are bids, we are expected to compete with global organizations, okay, fine. It makes us better because we're able to still leverage. But at the same time, you will probably never see companies, technology companies, leveraging to become the large dimension daters of the world. You go to South Africa, you find companies there, $2 billion revenue companies. And you find some of those companies grew from South Africa, and then they became multinationals. They went from South Africa, they went into Europe, they went buying companies in Australia, they went into America. But because the South Africans protected them, probably because the market was closed, so they had no choice. I'm not sure about what it is. But in our case, we need to figure out how do we leverage local companies. And Professor Gal said yesterday, look, when his closing statement was, we need to champion local companies and say, look, this company, we are willing to push them to get to the top. Not because we're not saying we want patronage. We're just saying we are good at what we do. We need to be given a chance. And at the same time, the government also needs to figure out how do they ensure that when they're procuring services, they insist that at least 45% of the work will be done locally. You see, the next thing what will happen is IBM will say, okay, fine, or other major multinationals, we are being told to source 40%. Why don't we start doing acquisitions? The next thing you see, companies begin to be acquired. The next thing you see, you answer the question, you start a company. Since you know you're growing the company, you take it public. The next thing is a multinational buying you. Then the whole ecosystem, the whole stock market, we start moving from brick and mortar stock market to intellectual property driven stock market. Because what's happening, you're sure you invest in this company, the next company is going to come and buy the company because there's the whole ecosystem is moving forward.
All right, and I want you to take that up in the closing comments, but I want to start with Solomon, because that challenge has been thrown at companies such as yours, IBM. I know you're not the CEO, so you'll not particularly speak on behalf of the entire company, but how do you then operate in these local markets? Do you seek out local people like 7Cs and come and say, we want to deploy this technology, but we know you have the local expertise, you know your way around?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, IBM actually really works quite a bit in a very collaborative type of atmosphere and environment. So we are all into going and doing some sort of joint programs, joint development and so forth. So there is a system that's set up so that both companies can mutually benefit. So there are systems that will make this type of interaction work. But I want to add something to the previous point. I think whenever we're innovating locally, we should also be thinking globally. By that, what I mean is, for one, we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Whatever we're doing here should be so that we will be competitive at a global scale. If we're making the ICs, if we're designing them now, here, we have to make sure that they will compete with the ICs that are being designed by Intel and so forth. If we're coming up with the newest database system, let's make sure that we can compete. Because at the end of the day, it has to be cost effective, it has to cost less, and it also has to be power efficient, and it has to be something that's better than a product that's out there. I think if we work on new technologies that are like that, for one, other big companies will be interested in working together in collaboration, and also I think local companies will be thriving very well.
Right, and Joe, again, as we come to closing comments, the whole idea of being wealthy, fabulously wealthy through ideas, how far away are we in Kenya to that being true? Where you have your Sergey Brins and people like this with private jets and all these sorts of things simply because of what is up here, not because my father owned 1,000 acres.
I think that is slowly starting to happen. And I would say that, well, I won't mention Mike, but the people who started businesses and they're moving up in that same direction. Primarily because also businesses are beginning to appreciate the value that they're adding. So, you know, when we were going in and starting our businesses, you brought in the idea and the investors would say, well, that's an idea, I have the cash, so I get the equity. That's beginning to change. People are actually saying, okay, there's value for the idea and there's a huge importance for you to be in the business because all we have is money. So we're beginning to appreciate that value. And even for multinationals or companies coming from out, they're beginning to say, look, we can't do this ourselves. You need to understand the market. You need to understand how to work with everybody. And so you need to work with the local teams. So that means that value is coming and people are beginning to invest well. I would say the capital markets are also beginning to work well, even though right now we're in a global recession. I think in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see that happen. Some people came with helicopters.
The challenge was thrown at you, Bitange, and your government.
Not my government. I'll be in trouble. I like what is saying about procurement, and indeed the government responded. If you recall, there was a directive that the government buys local furniture, and that has worked very well. We have been pushing for at least 40% local IT to be given to local IT firms. The problem has been that when law is made in this country, nobody bothers. When it comes out and it becomes restrictive is when we complain, because the procurement law that is in place now was actually responding to the past deeds, and it's become a hindrance to, I've said this several times, that it needs to be reviewed. We need to have conferences like this to review that law, to make it possible that we can help or accommodate local enterprises that are coming up. It is so restrictive that a multinational asks for 5 acres of land, and we can't find a provision where either the president or the prime minister can give that land. And this is something to create 7,000 to 10,000 jobs. You can't believe it. And again, once we begin to review, we need you to participate. And that's where the problem comes. Nobody participates, nobody cares about it until it becomes a problem.
Mike, as you've been taking your closing comments, I want you to incorporate the fact of money. How important is it when Kamau's people are starting companies? And there's, yes, we want to change the world, and yes, we want to do these great innovations, but how important is it for you to just sit there and think, I want to be rich?
What was most important was, as I started the business, I managed to get, or I connected with a venture capitalist, an individual. It was the late James Gachigi, and really what he said, I'm investing in you, Mike, not the business. So the first thing entrepreneurs don't seem to understand is that sometimes people invest in you as an individual, not in the idea, because many people can have ideas. Now, there aren't many people like that in the market. So now how do we ensure that we're able to create that level of venture capitalists in the market who believe in you and invest in you? Now, the next thing was beyond money, and that's what most of us think, money is the primary motivator. I think what is most critical and what I've learned is mentorship. You see what happens, you've got an idea, you don't know how to run a business. So constantly what you need is mentorship, not even money. So part of Kamau's people, what they need is people like myself and yourself to be able to see we are willing to volunteer to sit in their boards or to give them advisory or even mentor them to go to the next level. Because what happens, the fundamentals of business, you have a great business idea, you have a great technology, but probably you don't understand how to run a business, you don't understand integrity, you don't understand brand, you don't understand critical things that will shut your business. You need to understand one day you're going to have near-death experiences. What do you do at that particular moment? The next thing, you're going to have talent issues. How do you structure that? You can't probably even afford to hire a talent manager. You can't afford probably to hire a good HR organization or marketing company. How do you put your brand? You go and you go and set up a company, and you call it, you make it so Kenyan name, such a Kenyan name, then you expect you're going to export that brand. It will never happen because it's so Kenyanized, you know? You need to create a global brand. But a guy who is 26 years old or a lady who is 27 years old, how do you communicate this to them? You can only do this through mentorship. So one of the things, so as you grow into the next level, there's private equity. And we got in private equity, but they're tough private equity guys. They want return, but they're also very good in terms of helping you scale your business. So I tell you, Mike, we want to take this business Pan-African. What is your plan? We'll give you the cash flow, but that now helps you to go to the next level. The next thing is not pushing the company to go to the stock market. Again, the more support you get at a local level in terms of business, the more you're able to scale your business. Now, by the time you go to the stock market, or you probably have a futuristic trade sale, then the helicopter, you can buy the helicopter for sure, right? Right? But we need, from a point of view, to help other companies through mentorship.
I want to take in that challenge of mentorship. So, yes, it's important. But how many of them are coming through to you, for instance, and coming and saying, we don't want to give your people money because we may not have it, but we know how to run a company. We know how finances work, and so we want to be able to take your people through a class in financial management. You want to take your people through a seminar on marketing. How many people are coming through, or even looking for these people and coming and telling them, let's take someone to take you through media management so that when you appear in front of the camera, you don't have unkempt hair?
Well, at present, that's really not the question, because we're really just a startup ourselves. So we're getting to the point now where people are starting to know about what we're doing. People like Mike are aware, people like Joe are aware, people, of course, we have so much support from Dr. Ndemo, and people are beginning to know, and we ourselves are sort of letting people know more and more. So we haven't come to the point yet where people can come in numbers to say we want to mentor the young people and so on. I have no doubt it'll happen. But I'm very glad about the question that Mike was just answering before, and that was to do with money and how important that is. And I think for me, as a value, if money is given too much prominence, is a problem, and society will have a problem. And I think if you look at even the wealth that's coming through in China right now, I've heard a lot of reports through the media about concern about, you're rich and then what? And so, we really need to think beyond that. There's also the issue, like whenever I'm in class teaching, I ask the students, how many of you might become a lecturer? You get maybe 1 out of 100. So what's going to happen to the education system? So we're on strike right now around money, but some of these things are a labor of love. Some of these things you do because you enjoy it. There's a certain satisfaction that may not necessarily have to be monetized. So I think that's really important. So when someone's an engineer and they're able to solve people's problems, the money will come. And the mentorship is vital because they'll need to know how to handle the money so that the money doesn't handle them or destroy them, because that, again, it can happen very frequently. So I think it's really important for us to put money in its place where all this is concerned. It's vitally important for the entire economy and so on, but it cannot become our God, so to speak.
And that is bringing us to a very neat end to this program on what we've been discussing. Is the whole question of innovation. This is obviously at the East African Business Summit taking place in Nanyuki. And the question of innovation is one that is going to move forward, because obviously that's what leads to companies getting greater valuations and helping out the entire economy. But that's been your program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Wallace Kantai. Goodbye.